Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Startup Boston podcast, where I interview founders, investors, and influencers in the Boston startup community to uncover actionable advice and stories from their experiences. I'm your host, Nick Dupuy. This is the 26th episode of the podcast, and today I interview Win Smith. Win has a bit of a different story from what you usually hear here on the podcast. You see, Win's father was a founding member of Merrill Lynch, and Win worked there for 28 years, where he was the executive vice president. When new management was brought in and disagreed with the values the firm had been run on since its founding, Win left. He moved from busy New York City to Warren, Vermont, to run Sugarbush Ski Resort full-time, which he had purchased a few years prior. At the time, Sugarbush was nearing bankruptcy, but thanks to the investments made by Win and others, they have been able to turn Sugarbush around to a thriving ski resort it is today. A few things Win talks about are the important role that the government's EB-5 program played in reviving Sugarbush and bringing it to profitability, how they are shifting their approach as the resort's clientele shifts from baby boomers to millennials, and what it was like to completely shift careers at age 55 and go from New York City to Vermont. If you like today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes so you can get all of the new episodes as soon as they're released right on your podcast app. And as always, you can find today's show notes at startupbostonpodcast.com, and you can reach me at nic@startupbostonpodcast.com. Enjoy today's episode. Win Smith, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
It's my pleasure, Nick. Good to be with you.
There's a lot I want to talk about today, going from Merrill Lynch and then to Vermont and Sugarbush. But first, can you give us a little background about yourself?
Sure. Well, I was born in 1949, so I'm getting to be an aging baby boomer. But I grew up and went to school in New York City, and then I went to school in Massachusetts at Deerfield Academy, went on to Amherst College, where I was for 4 years. I stayed a year as an intern. And then I went off to business school at Wharton in Philadelphia, and right after that I joined Merrill Lynch and spent 28 years until I retired and became a ski bum.
So tell me about you're at Merrill Lynch for 28 years, a company that your father was one of the founders of.
Yeah.
Why did you leave there after 28 years in 2001?
Well, I loved every day I worked at Merrill, other than the last day. And there was a new president who was appointed. His name was Stan O'Neill, who's a pretty infamous guy now in Wall Street. And he had asked me to stay as vice chairman and to be responsible for our global relationships. I had, the last 8 years, really been chairman of Merrill Lynch International. But when I went into a final chat with him and we talked about the values, we talked about the principles of the firm, it was clear to me that he had no idea of what they really stood for. He did not want to continue them. And I thought it was going to create a climate that I just could not be part of. And so I left. And little did I realize that a short 6 years later, the firm would almost be brought down.
What was it like leaving a company that your father had founded after 28 years working there because you didn't like the way that it was going to be run?
It was very tough. It was a tough decision. I must say I woke up the next day and I wondered what the hell I had done. I really wondered if it was the right decision. I was concerned about, leaving a lot of people that I really enjoyed, a lot of people that I liked working for me. I felt maybe I was letting them down. But, as I thought about it, I realized that you have to be true to your principles and your values. And if I'd stayed there, I thought I would have been a hypocrite, supporting something I really couldn't believe in.
You wrote a book called Catching Lightning in a Bottle. Why did you want to write that book?
Well, I felt that, again, what Stan had done is he had really done a lot of revisionist history about Merrill Lynch. He'd redefined what the Mother Merrill stood for. He was quoted very publicly at being very disparaging about it. He was saying that Merrill was bloated and was full of nepotistic endeavors. And I thought the true history of Merrill Lynch had to be told. And so that's why I sat down. It took me, 4, almost 5 years to write it. But it's a really complete history from day one when Charlie Merrill founded the firm until the day that it was acquired by Bank of America in 2008.
Where does the name for the book come from?
Well, it really came from a meeting of alumni of Merrill Lynch. And we get together, this particular group, about every 2 years, go somewhere, have a nice retreat and a golf outing. And one fellow at the end of the meeting wrote to the organizer, and he said, "Thanks so much for doing it." He says, "It was great being with everybody there." And he said, "It reminded me of the wonderful years we had at Merrill Lynch. Those years were like catching lightning in a bottle." And I said, "Wow, there's a great title for a book."
So what did you do after you left Merrill Lynch? What did you do after that?
Well, for the first few years, I was really doing my own private equity investments, and Sugarbush was one of them. And after 2 years, I really said, instead of this being a passive investment where, I'm managing it through others, that maybe I will, restore it to health and flip it and sell it. I decided, I think I want to become an active manager of Sugarbush. So I moved up to Vermont. I really took over as not only the primary owner, but really the operating CEO. And I've been doing that ever since, and I consolidated my private equity really into this one investment.
So what was wrong with Sugarbush when you first purchased it, and how have you been able to turn it around since?
Well, Sugarbush, if you go back, had a glorious history. It was founded in 1958. It was founded also by a family, the Gadd family out of Long Island. And for the first few years, it really did extraordinarily well. It had one of the first gondolas in the country. It hired Stein Erikson to be the ski director. And it was known as Mascara Mountain because it attracted really many of the glamorous people from New York. But in the ensuing years, it was taken over by a series of owners and managers. And by the time 2000 came along, it was really suffering under the American Ski Corporation. It had quite a few years of deferred maintenance. It had a really bad reputation with the local community. American Ski Corporation was not doing well. And so that was our home mountain at that time. We invested a lot of time and energy into it. And we really thought that we were really concerned that it was either going to continue to deteriorate or might actually go out of business. So that's when I and another partner, along with two local people who were going to manage the company, made an offer to buy the mountain.
And so how did you first go about turning it around and making it profitable again?
Well, like any business, you sometimes underestimate how difficult a turnaround can be. We knew the big factors. We knew there had been brand erosion. We knew there had been market share loss. We knew there was deferred, maintenance that had to be corrected. We knew there were bad community relationships. We knew we had to build a new management team. And that probably turned out to be a little bit more difficult than we anticipated. It took a little bit longer, but those were the fundamental things that we focused on and really took us to about 2007 and 2008 to really turn the corner. And since then, it's been a good, sustainable business.
Is there anything that you've been able to carry over from Merrill Lynch to running Sugarbush?
Oh, absolutely. A ton of stuff. In many ways, there are a lot of similarities. The first similarity is you have to know what you can't control. My old world, you couldn't control the direction of the markets or the economy or interest rates. In my new world, I certainly can't control the weather. So you have to focus on what you can control. And one thing you can absolutely control is how you deliver guest service. So that's, certainly something I learned from my old world. And also I learned from Merrill the value of principles and values. We had 5 values at Merrill Lynch, focusing on the client, operating, as a team, being involved in the community, being respectful of your people, and having integrity. And I frankly, since I thought those values were being diminished under the current regime at Merrill, I just basically took them and applied it at Sugarbush. And those are the values we operate under up there.
So how do you go about providing the great customer experience?
You have to work hard. And first of all, you have to set a tone. The tone starts at the top of the organization. People have to believe that you really mean that. You have to assemble a team that really embraces it. And then you have to train, and you have to really help people understand what is good customer service. Some of it is very basic. It's like the golden rule. But some of it is also learning, practices and techniques that make customer service even better. It's also making sure that you really know what the customer wants. It's knowing who your customer is. You can't be all things to all people. So it's really a series of fundamental things that, I learned in my old job and I really try to apply in this new job.
What was it like for you to completely kind of switch careers I think you were 55 at the time?
I was, yeah.
And not only just switching different careers, but going from New York City to Vermont. It's just two totally different cultures.
Two totally different. But, I grew up also in New England. I knew New England. I've been coming to Sugarbush for many years. So it wasn't like going to a totally foreign land. I've always loved the outdoors. That's been my passion since birth. So it was very easy in many ways to get rid of that suit, get rid of the traffic, get rid of the hassles, and move up to an environment like Vermont. But, I was also throwing away a lot of friends, a lot of excitement, a career I enjoyed. So, there was a transition. But this I look upon as a second career, and I feel blessed to have had 28 years in one career and hopefully at least 28 years in another career.
What did your friends and family think when you first made that decision?
They thought my family was very supportive. I think most of my friends thought I was absolutely crazy. What the hell are you doing? Going to Vermont, becoming a recluse, throwing away a lot of money. But I think after 10 years now, I think a lot of people are a little bit envious of what I'm doing.
Can you talk a little bit about the EB5 program and
Sure,
how that has
absolutely
how that has enabled you to help you to turn around Sugarbush?
Well, that's a great question because EB5 is now under a lot of scrutiny and there's a lot of controversy related to it. But the original intent of the program was very sound. I still think is very sound. And it's giving access to the capital markets to small businesses, sometimes in rural areas, sometimes in depressed areas that may not have access to capital at an affordable rate otherwise. The idea of, using people that want to get their green cards and become citizens of the United States and having foreign capital invested in the United States, I think is a good program. It's controversial because people say, well, you're selling green cards. That's unfair. And so that's one point of view. My point of view is you actually are finding people that actually want to become citizens, taxpayers of this country. You're giving them the benefit of getting a green card faster by investing in the country. Mm-hmm. The investment had to be an at-risk investment. So it's like a venture capital investment. These individuals realized that they were investing in startup companies with high risk, but they were doing it for the purpose of getting a green card and hopefully also getting their capital back. As you know, there's been a lot of controversy recently. J. Peak has been taken over by a receivership, and there are a lot of lessons there to be learned. There have been frauds in other parts of the country. And what I worry now is a good program could actually be destroyed by, some bad few. And that would be a shame, I believe.
Yeah, and it also, allowed you to get investment at a time when you might not have otherwise been able to get it.
It did. See, we were actually in the process of beginning to do an equity raise in 2007. And as you know, what happened in 2007 and 2008, it became very difficult to get access to the capital markets. Banks were not going to lend to us. And we got introduced to the EB-5 program. We were able to raise $20 million. We used that $20 million along with our own equity. And by the way, we used more of our own equity than EB-5 funds and some bank financing. And we were able to really redo the whole base area of Sugarbush, which has allowed us to really right, the ship, and it's allowed us to become viable and sustainable today. And the EB-5 investors, the way they get paid back is through our future real estate development. And it's very clear that's the path for them to getting paid back. It's not guaranteed. We have to do the development, but all proceeds from our development, 100%, goes to the EB-5 investors until they're paid back.
Okay.
So far, we raised capital from 40 investors. 18 have exited the program. 22 remain to be repaid.
So they get paid back like through the condos that you've built?
That's correct, yeah. Okay. So we currently have a 16 unit condo that was just completed. It's for sale. And 100% of the net profits, after selling expense and after mortgage, goes to repay the EB-5 investors.
Okay. Do you think that you would have been able to turn around Sugarbush the way you have if it wasn't for the EB-5 program?
It would have been a lot harder. Our capital improvements would have taken more years to come. And, there's a question, could we have done it quickly enough? So, yeah, I think EB-5 was very responsible for us becoming viable.
What are some of the other improvements you've been able to make through that program?
We've done a lot, including the whole base area, which is really brand new. We've got 3 new base lodges. We have a hotel. We have a restaurant. But on the mountain, since we purchased the resort, we've put in 3 new chair lifts, 2 new surface lifts. We've significantly upgraded the snowmaking system, redone main pipes, rebuilt compressors, bought a significant number of low-energy snow guns. And I might just pause for a second on those because last year, was a terrible winter year. We were able to be open 153 days. We skied until May 1st. And at times we were the only resort to be 100% open. So the new snow guns, because they use far less energy, allowed us to use more water. We had those windows of opportunity. And it was also good for our bottom line. So last year, we pumped out 24% more water than we've ever pumped out to make snow. And we did it at a 25% less cost than 2 years ago. Good for the bottom line, good for the skier, but also good for the environment because we are really using much less energy. So that energy efficiency, is helping our contribution to addressing climate change.
Yeah, I skied a lot last year at Mount Snow in Stratton.
Yep.
And I don't think they ever had 100% open.
No, they did not.
Last year.
No, they did not.
It was really...
And, southern Vermont, they don't have the same altitude that we have in the higher mountains. They're not as far north. And they tend not to get sometimes the lake effect that we get in northern Vermont.
What's the most difficult part of running a ski resort?
It's like any business. I would say the most challenging and maybe the most important thing you can do is building a good team. So if you have a good team and they understand the direction, they embrace it, you can delegate to them, and you can get an awful lot done. Vermont, there's certainly always the challenges of operating in Vermont. It's not a terribly business-friendly state. It's a high-cost state. But you have to say that's the given reality. You can complain about it or you can accept, try to change it, but, operate within the constraints that they deliver you. The weather is also, it's out of our control. So last year, we had the second lowest snowfall total that Sugarbush has had since it opened. We only had 156 inches of snow at the summit. But, I turned that around a little bit. That was still 13 feet. It did allow us with snowmaking to be 100% open. So you can't worry too much about what you can't control. If you do that, then it's a very difficult business.
As your clientele shifts more from baby boomers to millennials, how do you change your approach so that you can continue to grow revenue?
That's a great question, because the baby boomers, really made the ski industry. Now, people say, well, the baby boomers, they're aging, they're dying, they're going to stop skiing. I actually have a slightly different view on that. I think the baby boomers are different than generations before them. They've got a little bit of the Peter Pan mentality. They're never going to grow old. They're never going to be like their parents. They're never going to retire in Florida. And we are seeing now that boomers are skiing longer and maybe more aggressively than their predecessor generations. So I'm not giving up on the boomers yet. But yes, attracting the millennials who have a bigger population than the baby boomers is key. I think you've got to do it in a number of ways. One way that we've addressed it is through price. So we came out with a pass for millennials, really for people 19 to 30. We called it the 420s pass, which is a little bit of a double entendre there. And we priced it, we thought, a killer rate at $299. And we found that we went from a couple of hundred millennials, season pass holders, to several thousand. So we really felt that we have reintroduced people that used to ski in college, used to ski when their parents were buying their pass, who may have dropped out of the sport, and we think we've reintroduced them to the industry. We did that alone for about 2 years, and I now notice that all of our competition has a millennial pass. So I think that's good for the industry.
Do you see a lot of first-time skiers on the mountain?
We do, and that's, again, it's a great question, because first-time skiers are key to your business. First-time customers are key to your business. So you want to retain your existing, but you constantly have to grow new skiers. So the key, I think, to getting a new skier is keeping a new skier. And there's too much of a turnover when people ski 1 or 2 days, they never come back again. So making sure that first experience is a good experience is really key. And it starts with, first of all, make sure people have the right equipment. If they have boots that are poor fitting, ill fitting, they're not going to come back.
Yeah.
If they don't have an instructor, that helps them do, something that's fun and exciting the first few days, never ski with your boyfriend or girlfriend. Go to a pro. That's a big thing. And then also, I think, doing something that's affordable. We have a first time to lifetime program where I think we price about $265. You get your equipment and you get 3 days of lessons. And if you complete those 3 days of lessons, we give you a pass for the rest of the year. And the idea there is to motivate you to continue skiing 5, 6, 7 days, because if you do that, you're going to be hooked.
Yeah, that seems like a great deal.
It's a great program, and it's worked very well for us.
How do you see Sugarbush changing over the next 5 to 10 years?
Every business has to constantly think about innovation, but also make sure that you have your core values that are intact. So we have phenomenal competition, really tough competition. So we can't copy people. We have to be ourselves. And the one way we're trying to differentiate ourselves is by being really as an authentic a Vermont resort as you can be, appreciating the environment we work in. The Mad River Valley is a very special place. It's been really preserved well. It feels like it's authentic Vermont. And so we want to work in the character of that. But at the same time, we just have to constantly look and innovate. The millennial pass that I mentioned is an idea there. We have to keep looking at technology. We realize now that social media is terribly important. We recognize that an app is critical. People want to look at our app, get information, look at the snow reports, see the snow stake, and we constantly have to think about, innovations and staying ahead of the competition. Because we're small and not as big as a Vail resort, we have to probably be a little bit more nimble as well.
I want to move now into our rapid fire questions. So it's rapid fire questions, not necessarily rapid fire answers. So the first question is, what's something about you that most people don't know?
Oh, God, I'm actually probably a pretty good athlete.
What do you like to do besides skiing?
Well, I loved everything. I was actually a really good equestrian young in life. I ran a marathon in 2:47:48, which I'm kind of really proud because I'd never do that again. I was a pretty good soccer and rugby player, and now I've learned to be a good skier.
Wow. Yeah, you didn't really get involved in skiing until
late in life. Yeah, right? I skied a year in college and, kind of really went up more for the party scene than the ski scene. And then I didn't really start skiing until I was about 34, 35 when my kids started skiing. So I've made up for that in later years.
And now you get like over 100 days a year on the
At least 100 days. Yeah, that's my goal.
What are some of your favorite tools that help make your life and work easier?
I think being around people. I just love learning from different people. And I think, there's so many interesting people in the world at all levels, at all, walks of life, at all ages. And, really looking and seeking and, finding interesting people is a great learning tool.
Do you have any favorite blogs or books?
Blogs. Yeah, well, I have a lot of books I read. I do read, a reasonable number of business books, but some of the old classics you love as well. I will say the blogs I follow very closely are the ski blogs, and I find you better follow those because there's a lot of conversation going on, and you better stay on top of it. And sometimes you have to respond to correct some misinformation.
Which ones are some of your favorite blogs?
Well, probably Ski MRV, which is really dedicated to, the Mad River Valley and Sugarbush, and the Alpine Zone is really more for all ski areas in the east, so I do look at those pretty carefully.
Okay. And what about books?
Books? Well, I guess one of the more interesting books I read because it was something that was sort of close to home was a recent book about the Michael Skakel trial that was Kennedy's cousin that was accused of killing Martha Moxley in Greenwich. And it's one of those things that I always thought and presumed he was totally guilty. That was what the talk was in Greenwich. But after reading Bobby Kennedy's book and learning about how basically exculpatory evidence was withheld and how the person's, eyewitnesses were not allowed to testify, it really opened my eyes to, some of the bad things that happen in our justice system and some of the assumptions you make and how a poor man like that spent many years in jail for a crime he probably ended up not committing.
What's your favorite trail at Sugarbush?
Oh, who's your favorite child? That's a tough question to answer. But if I had to name, well, I'll give you a couple trails for different reasons.
Okay.
My dog is named after Rumble. And Rumble is probably the most challenging little gnarly trail. Steep and deep, no snowmaking. And when you have deep powder on that, that's just a joy. Mm-hmm. But then there's a cruiser called Snowball Spring Fling. And, on a freshly groomed morning, that's a fabulous trail as well. Paradise is kind of the kids' favorites. But I think at Sugarbush, what I think I enjoy and many people enjoy more than anything else are actually the woods. And, skiing in the woods at Sugarbush is, just a phenomenal experience.
Are you allowed to ski? Are there certain sections for glade skiing?
Well, we basically, we have an open trail policy.
Okay.
And we do have some glades that are marked. We have some entrances into those. Those are the official trails. But basically, within bounds, we have almost 4,000 acres that people explore.
What's your favorite mountain to ski besides Sugarbush?
Oh, Mad River Glen. That's in the east.
What about in the west?
God, it's hard to pick a favorite. I'll tell you the ones I really enjoy.
Okay.
Starting with the one I had only skied for the first time 2 years ago, and that's Telluride. Wasn't there when they had the best conditions, but I could just see what marvelous terrain they had. Mm-hmm. And I really like Steamboat. Steamboat has some great glades as well. I really enjoy Highlands. Utah, you can't go wrong. Obviously Alta comes top of mind when you ski there. But one of the things I've found is that Deer Valley is not only an intermediate mountain. They have some really interesting terrain over by Lady Morgan and the Empire Bowl, so that can be a lot of fun as well.
I'm going to Big Sky this year.
Oh, Big Sky I've been to. I like Big Sky too.
I've never been there, but
it can be a cold mountain.
Really looking forward to it.
It can be a cold mountain, but that's a cool mountain. I enjoy that too.
What advice would you give to your 25-year-old self?
Same advice I'd give to everybody. And that is make sure whatever you do, you love doing and you're enthusiastic about it when you get up in the morning. And there are too many people that really work at a job and they don't enjoy it. And some people have no choice and, that's tough. But I think if you have a choice, really focus on what you love doing.
Did you ever have a time when you didn't love what you were doing?
No, I've been very fortunate.
Yeah, that's good.
There are days where you get down, but, you have to sort of get yourself up again and get refocused.
Mm-hmm. Just a few final questions here to close out. So the first one is, where can people find out more about Sugarbush?
Best place is our website, www.sugarbush.com, or look at our app, look at our Facebook, look at our Instagram. But the website has phenomenal information.
And the last question is, do you have any parting thoughts, advice, or suggestions for the audience?
For the audience, well, again, what I said earlier is find stuff that you really like doing and do it with friends. There's a tremendous power in a community. And I think more and more, what I'm seeing about millennials that are maybe educating us older people is they really like being part of a community. They travel with friends. They have a good time together. And a community is a very, very powerful thing if you get into the right community. And the other thing I'd say, be true to yourself, be honest, be ethical, and really have a strong set of values.
Wen, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure.
You're welcome, Nick. Enjoyed it.
If you liked today's episode, be sure to subscribe to the podcast on iTunes. You'll get all my new episodes as soon as they're released right on your podcast app. And if you really liked today's episode, it would mean a lot to me if you could write a review of the podcast as well. Just go to startupbostonpodcast.com/iTunes. And remember, you can find all show notes with links at startupbostonpodcast.com. Until next time, if you have any feedback, ideas for guests, or just want to say hi, you can reach me at nic@startupbostonpodcast.com or reach out on Twitter at startupbosscast. That's startup BOS cast. Cheers.